Bandidos, we're diving deep into the Division 2's exotic gear and weapons in the glorious year 5 of 2023.
Ain't too many kids bang with us. Situation is fight one. What's going to do? Why go run?
We have 16 exotic gear pieces and 24 exotic weapons, making up a grand total of 40 exotics. I don't want to do the typical tier list thingy. That's not how we roll on this channel. Nah, we like to do things differently here, with a touch of Tux sauce, of course. So, we'll be grading these exotics on a broader scale from bad to godly to sort out the wheat from the chaff with a bit more nuance, care, and feeling.
I want my money back.
So, it's still kind of a tier list, but with words. I rank the exotics based on their outright PvE performance, their exotic functionality,
There we go. You fucking happy? Come on.
and the overall accessibility of both of those things.
By the way, why are we wearing bras on our heads?
Ceremonial.
First up, the bad boys and girls. These exotics have very few redeeming qualities.
Please stop my...
They're like the squad members who bail on you during the final boss fight. Unreliable and just not pulling their weight. You'd rather use a rusty spoon than equip these.
There is no spoon.
Are you taking a piss?
First up on the list is actually going to surprise you, and it's sort of a shame. The Shocker Punch. So by the way, you can get this just by completing the rewards track, and then they will be pushing this over to the general loot pool, targeted loot, which would be holsters. The talent is called Defibrillators. The stun received by the agent from shock status effect will be reduced by 50%. We hardly ever get shocked. Rare enough too where I wouldn't want to roll in shock proof into my build. And then using this shield will give you 100% to melee damage. First of all, melee damage, I don't care if you have 1000% melee damage. It's crap in PvE. Melee sucks. Using St. Elmo's engine with the holster will give 100% extra melee damage. Boo. Again. And will make the next melee attack to apply shock to that target. All right, so that's pretty cool. And then it says using all 3 items will offer all of the above mentioned bonuses, and the shock from the melee attack will have a 5-meter radius. So basically, it spreads the shock to other targets. The downside, what it said in there, you have to have all 3 things. That is so specific. There's just basically no build diversity for the Shocker Punch. Let me introduce you to one of the worst exotics in the game, the Sacrum Imperium. Does this surprise anybody it's on the list? Now, here's where things get really ugly. Tag enemies when in crosshairs, maximum of 10. If agent kills any marked target with a headshot, all other targets will have 50% movement speed decrease and receive burn for 10 seconds. Targets are marked after 1 second in the crosshair, which feels sort of long, and they did improve that. And notice how bad this thing handles. I have such a hard time landing shots with this weapon. It's ridiculous. It makes you feel like there's something wrong with you. And it takes so many shots to bring down an enemy. I had this boss standing in front of me, and he's actually not that difficult to kill, and I just couldn't bring him down. He ended up killing me. Worst off is the ammo situation. You don't get a lot of ammo with marksman rifles. I had to refill my ammo like 3 times during one control point. And what about that scope? It doesn't even proc one of the best talents for marksman rifles outside of Headhunter. Hey Bandidos, the community we have built together wouldn't have been possible without you. So as a thank you for supporting my channel and the community, I'm bringing you the hookup on member perks, including even more Division 2 content and the celebrated gaming music playlists. If you're not part of Texas Players Club, now is your chance. All right, next on the poo-poo list is the Imperium holster. So while in combat, applies burn to the enemy closest to you within 20 meters. The cooldown is 35 seconds. So the downside of this thing really is that there's no targeting system for it. It's sort of just random, and the cooldown is way too long for it to be effective for really anything else. Doesn't have a place in PvE. It's too random to be effective. Your eyes aren't deceiving you. That's right, the Ravenous is on the poo-poo list. This is a raid exclusive exotic that you can only get by getting it to drop in the Iron Horse raid. It's all about the talent. It's actually very clunky and surprisingly bad. Now, I know what some of you are thinking, that there are some raid specific niche plays that this weapon is used for. Yeah, I get that, but that's too niche to get this outside of the bad list because of how it overall performs in PvE. The overall accessibility of its talent is just not there. When fired from the right shoulder, hits at offensive primers, and defensive primers when fired from the left shoulder. Hits from one shoulder will detonate detonate all the opposite shoulder's primers when present. The problem is the switching of shoulders. Not only is it very clunky, it actually gets you to miss a lot of shots. I don't know if that's a console specific thing, but it's a thing. And there's a lot of console players. And when you equip it with the shield, you can't switch shoulders. You're locked into the right shoulder. Fine, so no shield. But when you're running around shieldless, you take way too much damage, and it's way too slow to acquire that bonus armor to try to play into it as some sort of shieldless build. So that means it's a play from cover weapon. Fine. But from distance, there's no zoom on this weapon, and it's a rifle. This weapon doesn't play nice with our cover system. It requires very specific cover in order for you to be able to switch shoulders while shooting and while in cover. And there's a lot of cover where you're shooting around corners, and that basically is ineffective cover for this weapon. So it's making you stand behind specific cover. Oh, yuck. No surprise the bloody knuckles are on the list. You can get these in the open world wherever gloves are targeted loot. Over the top is a talent. Damaging an enemy with a grenade or striking an enemy with a melee attack activates Seeing Red. Seeing Red grants 25% weapon damage and 100% to melee damage. While on cooldown, damaging an enemy with a melee attack or hitting an enemy with the effect of a grenade will complete the cooldown instantly. So after you use it for the first time, remember, you basically have to melee twice. First of all, melees in the Division 2 are really clunky. 2, stopping a melee an enemy will get you killed in the Division 2 PvE. And that's because, again, melee sucks. There's no stagger from our melee, and the damage from our melee is worthless. Absolutely worthless. And if you're gonna rely on these knuckles in conjunction with your fire grenades, you're gonna run out. And you're also making yourself subjected to riot foam and whatever, where if you just laid in on them with your gun, they would have probably been dead in a fraction of the time it took you to actually land that melee. These are worthless. The Diamondback makes the bummer list. You can get the Diamondback by completing the Kenley College expedition. So basically, the Diamondback randomly marks an enemy, and hitting that enemy consumes the mark, guaranteeing a critical hit, which is really cool, with damage amplified by 20%, which is also cool. So after hitting a mark, all shots fired are guaranteed crits for 5 seconds, which isn't a ton of time. A new random enemy is marked afterwards and or whenever you reload, which is quite a pain. It's like basically fighting with an additional directive, and that's because that random marked enemy thing tends to be an enemy that's not your greatest threat. And this thing marks somebody that's like in the back hiding behind cover. It really is random, and that can get you killed. It's very difficult to use. One of the reasons why is because of its slow reload, because every time you reload with this one, it marks a different target. And so if you have an ideal target marked and then you reload, now it's somewhere else. And then you got to shoot and reload again. All of this is nonsense. The Merciless is an oldie, but not really a goodie. You can get this exotic by farming anywhere target loot is set to rifles. This weapon fires on trigger pull and release. If both bullets hit the same enemy, you gain a stack. At 7 stacks, shooting an enemy deals 500% amplified damage and creates a 7-meter explosion, dealing 500% weapon damage, consuming the stacks. One of the biggest problems is the handling on this thing. I mean, it's crazy, especially on the stability, because this thing takes a walk to the sky, and that really impacts its time to kill. What a lot of people don't think about is the fact that the talent binary trigger doesn't actually give you any additional damage until you get that 7 stacks, which is basically 14 hits. Now, the problem with that damage, whether it's a huge amount of damage or not, is that it's random. You don't have control. You could be applying that damage to an enemy who's almost dead. And so what a waste. The randomness makes the talent basically useless because you want to apply it on a target that you actually need to punch hard. Instead, the weapon kicks in whenever it kicks in, and you have no choice about that. And so you're going around shooting a weapon that doesn't have a damage talent on the majority of its shots. And then when it does, there's a good chance that it's going to apply to a target that doesn't even really need to be hit that hard. And that, my banditos, is how you make the poo-poo list.
Next, the okay exotics. They're not terrible, but they're not exactly gonna blow your socks off either. So unless you want your teammates giving you the side eye, maybe consider whether they are worth your exotic slot, eh? First up, the Sweet Dreams Exotic Shotgun. It's a beast. It's actually really fun to run. You can get this where your targeted loot is set to shotguns. The talent's called Sandman, so melee attacks instantly kill non-elite enemies. The cooldown is 15 seconds. It gets the job done. You'll see it in the raid and even in legendary. So it's great for melee, but as far as shooting this thing, oh boy, Don't even try. On top of that, in the end game, most of us are playing on a heroic, and there's just so many elites in heroic. It's sort of pointless to run this in heroic content. The Chatterbox Exotic SMG is a fun one to run, at least once. You get this by farming hyena caches. You need 4 parts to craft this. Built on the P90 SMG, and it's got 60 rounds in the mag. The talent's called Incessant Chatter, so whenever you reload, your rate of fire is increased by 20% for each enemy within 15 meters for the duration of that magazine, and that stacks 5 times. That gets quite crazy when you got a bunch of enemies around you. It's insane. Kills refill 50% of your magazine, and in this game, when you're playing at the distances of an SMG, that means a lot. So the problem with this SMG isn't really the SMG itself, it's the engagement. So if we just take open world examples, most of the time you're coming across a onesie twosie type engagements, and that's not going to give you that really fun feeling that this SMG can bring to the table. And instead, it feels quite underwhelming. The exotic BTSU data gloves can farm Camp White Oak. Otherwise, farm glove loot, targeted missions in open world areas, especially Black Tusk and invaded missions with gloves as the loot target. It grants a 15% hive skill haste per skill tier, and detonating a hive refreshes your skill cooldowns and grants overcharge for 15 seconds. Basically, if you're not running a hive, these gloves are pretty much useless. So basically, the BTSU gloves are most useful for healer builds. And that's why you see the gloves mostly on raid healers, because the majority of raid players are running that reviver hive, where in legendary, that's not the case. The exotic Sawyer knee pad. So you can farm hyena mission bosses or knee pad loot targeted missions or areas in the open world, especially hyena missions with knee pads as the loot target. They come with the talent called Stand Your Ground, so you cannot be staggered by explosions, which is really helpful in legendary content or anytime you're playing against the Tusk. Increased total weapon damage by 3% for each second you are not moving. Increased total weapon damage by 30% is actually mega. So if you can stand still, these are a great thing to have. But the reality is a lot of our builds and playstyles require us to move. The Acosta's Go Bag Exotic Backpack. You can farm faction crates from any faction to get this, or farm backpack targeted loot missions in open world areas. This is mostly a skill build piece. It's got a really interesting 2-part talent. One is called 2 in a bag. You get an extra armor kit, an extra 3 grenade capacity, 25% more ammo, repair skills, and 10% more status effects. And that's where you see this backpack mostly is on status effect builds, and that's because of the other part of the talent. 1 in the hand, throwing a grenade refunds it and grants 1 skill tier for 15 seconds. Grants overcharge if already at skill tier 6. A lot of status effect builds run survivalists for their fire grenades and also the additional damage to status affected targets for the team. The cooldown is only 60 seconds and you can basically never run out of those fire grenades. The Bullet King in all its golden glory. You can fight Riker's mission bosses like Theo Parnell and James Dragoff to get this, or farm LMG loot targeted missions in open world areas. It comes with the talent called Bullet Hell. This weapon never needs to be reloaded. Isn't that the fantasy we're all looking for? For every 100 bullets that hit an enemy, replenish some ammo to you and your allies' reserves. This weapon does lack in the damage department, and it is noticeable, especially against those other LMGs that can effectively never reload also. The Backfire Exotic SMG. Head over to areas marked as SMGs for targeted loot to get it. It's an interesting SMG with a talent called Payment in Kind. It's good and bad. Basically, the reason why people run this is for that 200% critical hit damage potential. And when you get that, it does feel pretty good, except the weapon overall lacks some luster. Weapons 200% critical hit damage is great when you get there. The challenge is really the type of content you engage. It's really easy to lose all your stacks and have to start over. And so this weapon requires you to play quite aggressively. There's a hidden intention behind this weapon. It's not all for damage. That status effect actually forces hazard protection on your build. If you don't, you can have that bleed animation, which can kill you, but that aside, the animation just really sucks. You don't want to play with that. And so you want to be immune to bleed. That means you're gonna have to run a lot of hazard protection on your build, which is gonna chew up a lot of slots. Building around this one thoughtfully is required. The Exotic Waveform Holster. You can get this by farming holsters in the open world or in missions. It comes with the talent called Alternating Current. So basically you get 30% skill damage. The catch to it is that it teeter-totters between both your skills. So you do want to be running 2 skills that can
benefit from that 30% skill damage. Simple, and it does what it does. The downside to it is that it's in a very competitive slot and is not always best in slot because it doesn't always equate to the highest amount of skill damage on certain builds. In addition to that, alternating current can create frustration from that inconsistent damage. The Ninja Bike Exotic Messenger knee pads. You can get this by farming targeted loot where it is set to knee pads. The talent is parkour. Performing a cover-to-cover or vaulting reloads your drawn weapon and grants 25% bonus armor for 5 seconds. This could be really handy on certain weapons like the M870 shotgun. The downside is that it does limit you to a particular playstyle, or has you running around with your head cut off trying to find the right cover to vault over, or you find yourself in a reload situation and not able to move at all. This happens all too much in PvE content. The tardigrade armor system exotic chest piece can be farmed from True Sun's final mission bosses, or farmed chest targeted loot missions and open world areas, especially where True Suns are. It comes with a blade of nano plating as the talent, so whenever you or an ally's armor breaks, they gain 80% of your armor as bonus armor that lasts for 10 seconds. It says to have a 45-second cooldown, but killing an enemy with your specialization weapon can eliminate that. This is basically a life jacket. You still have to have some sort of heals or use an armor kit, so it's just sort of buying time for that. The downside is it's not the best option for solo play, and that's where the majority of the player base is, or at least spends the most of their time, making it a little limiting. The Doctor's Home Exotic Rifle. It's an M1A CQB, and it's actually a beast. The talent's called Doctor's Home, so shooting an enemy with this weapon will apply a mark for 5 seconds. If that mark target is killed, it will give you 10% armor repair and your whole party. It's actually got an unusually high RPM for an M1A. It comes with an 8x scope, so you are fixed with that, but it pairs up with some really powerful talents. For solo play, you might be better off with preservation that can give you up to 20% armor on kill over 5 seconds. The Blue Screen Exotic LMG. It comes with disruptors rounds, so basically you want to get 50 stacks, and then when you deploy a non-shield skill, you remove all those stacks and then trigger a status effect. Pulse, disrupt, and disorient, or all of those. The downside is because the status effects are part of the weapon talent, you can't actually increase the status effect durations. The other downside is that not every skill is going to make sense to pair up with this weapon in order to deploy the status effects. It's not the strongest weapon in the arsenal, but really good for team support. For solo PvE, there are a couple of builds you could run with this. The Dodge City Exotic Holster. This one's gonna take a little bit of work to get, but it is actually worth it. Visit Anaya, the blueprint vendor at the White House next to the crafting station, and purchase the item called Holster Intel. Go West, young agent. Then from there, complete the crafting quest. So it's got a talent called Quick Draw. While your pistol is holstered, gain a stack buff. When you swap to it, your first shot consumes the buff and deals 10% damage per stack. This can put out some seriously crazy damage. However, the downside is that it is one shot and it has to land. If not, then you have to wait another 30 seconds to get those full stacks. The other downside is that this pistol holster is not good for pistol builds. That's because if you're using your pistol as a primary, then you're not getting stacks. However, for other builds like cowboy builds that rely on rifles or even snipers, this is a good little piece to have to take down difficult enemies or fully proc your chain killer chest piece to allow you to chain kill. The downside to the holster is that there are alternate routes to accomplish this, like the Nemesis or even the TAC 50. Now we're talking. The good ones are the reliable pals, the ones that you can count on when the going gets tough. They may not be legendary, but sort of a medium point in terms of capability, functionality, and accessibility. Every single one of these is capable of doing what they do, and a great player can really make it their own and base their playstyle identity around them. As long as they remember, there are far better exotics out there. The Catharsis can be farmed anywhere targeted loot is set to masks. The Catharsis is extremely effective in group and solo PvE. You get up to 30% weapon damage when you take damage, which happens all the time, and the healing effect at 10% armor per second is so strong, standing in a cloud of heals allows you to take barrages and stay on your feet. The heals also apply to your team. The downside is that you cannot buff the heals from the talent Vicious Cycle using repair skills, because it's not a skill. If you're a fast play kind of bandito, then you will outrun the heal cloud all too much. And if you want to get the most out of this exotic, running a strong shield is advised. If shields aren't your thing, you're probably better off with another mask. The Bighorn Exotic Assault Rifle can be dropped in Legendary difficulty or the Dark Zone. It has a dual firing capability, full auto or semi-auto when in scope.
When scoped, you get ridiculous 450% weapon damage per shot, ideal for eliminating that one pesky target pelting you from afar. Going full auto to the head is where it's at, stacking up 100% extra headshot damage by doing so. It's got a decent rate of fire, and if you want to keep your shots on target, I recommend not increasing the RPMs more than 15%. The downside of the weapon is that it has a kick, so weapon handling, especially stability, is advised. You're gonna need to make use of and maintain those headshot damage stacks by going for the head as much as possible, or at least that's what the Bighorn asks of you for it to make sense. That's gonna lead to a lot of missed shots, leading to even more reloads and a slower time to kill than the testing range or spreadsheets leads on. And playing into that scope mode just makes you an underwhelming sniper, so use it only as needed. Who doesn't love 900 RPM madness? The Chameleon can be farmed anywhere targeted loot is set to assault rifles. This assault rifle is extremely fun to run, easy to use and effective. It's not the strongest AR in the arsenal, but when it's fully buffed, you're not gonna believe that. This exotic gives you 90% weapon damage, 50% crit damage, and crazy reloads. The mods and talent gives you all the crit chance your build needs when combined with your watch. That's very unique and very valuable for an assault rifle. All you need to get those is land shots on each zone, head, body, and legs, ranging from 30 to 75 hits. At 900 RPMs, that's not hard to do quickly, and buff lasts for 45 seconds and carries over when the battle ends to when the next battle starts. The downside is that the AR plays more like an SMG than an assault rifle. That's because it secretly is an SMG, or one was parted out to make it. The firing pattern and damage drop-offs are going to require you to play in close, making this weapon not ideal for all content or playstyles. It pairs nicely with just about anything, but if your build has too many talents requiring stacking, when you don't have those stacks, this weapon will feel like you're shooting marshmallows, giving you a slower kickoff to what is a fast-paced playstyle weapon. You get the Ridger's Pride exotic chest piece by completing the summit to floor 100, and then the quest that follows. It applies bleed to enemies hit inside 15 meters, making it extremely easy to use, and bleeding enemies will give you up to 48% armor regen, depending on how many you have bleeding. This opens up some cool synergies for those who love integrating status effects into their builds. However, 15 meters doesn't ever seem like it's enough, as enemies quickly exit the radius faster than they entered, which disengages your armor regen that's only meaningful over time. That's going to require an aggressive playstyle to get the most out of the healing aspect, which is really the best part when it happens. The biggest downside is that most engagements are limiting in size, usually 1 to 3 enemy combatants. That would give you 3 to 12% regen per second if they're all bleeding inside 15 meters, which isn't life-changing regen, especially since the odds are you're taking damage from these enemies too, and you have to spray all targets before you focus fire to get them all bleeding, which could force an untimely reload. The Ninja Bike bag can be farmed anywhere targeted loot is set to backpacks. Yes, it's in the loophole as of title update 18.3. It's sort of like a wild card in poker that steps in to complete your hand, but on builds, it unlocks an additional brand or gear set attribute. This is absolutely a game changer for build diversity and opens up a lot of space to add additional utility to your build. It also has the ability to help strong, unusable weapons become viable killing machines, and improves playstyle performance so much it has moments it seems like it's best in slot. The downside is that there are so many builds that this backpack just doesn't make sense on, far more than the average builder is aware of. It's extremely important you ask the right questions about your build when assembling a Ninja Bike backpack build. What you don't want to hear yourself say is, I'd be better off with X, Y, or Z. That means in 9 out of 10 builds, the Ninja Bike backpack is not there to add additional damage. It's there to help your performance through some sort of added utility, which can make you equally dangerous on the battlefield as one with the highest damage build. Oh, the Eagle Bearer exotic assault rifle and all its glory. You can get this from the Dark Hours raid or by a lucky drop in the Dark Zone. Talents aside, the high base damage, decent RPM, and a uniquely large 60-round mag make it one of the better assault rifles to run. The talent gives you up to 30% more accuracy with continuous fire, and a headshot kill will delay incoming damage for 15 seconds. The downside is that if you don't get 3 kills inside 15 seconds, the talent can kill you. That's a big downside, especially with the stability on this thing making headshots difficult to acquire. It requires an extremely aggressive playstyle to get the most out of the talent, and very few things counteract the talent's delayed damage that comes all at once. I find the weapon is most enjoyed with strong handling on the build, with power to make sure you get those chain kills. Here's where things get spicy. The great exotics are like that hidden gem of a taco truck you found in the back alley. You know, the one that blows your mind and leaves you wondering why you haven't tasted this goodness before. Great exotics are the one who are on the cusp of being meta contenders, but they need an elite player to take them there. These exotics can be severely game breaking in the right hands, but you gotta have skills. But for
for the average Joe, they're a noticeable step up from everything we've seen to this point. The Pestilence. Who doesn't love a good plague? Get this, where targeted loot is LMGs. Hits apply a debuff, dealing 100% damage over 10 seconds, stacking up to 50 times. Damage over time that can be as high as 1.5 million per tick. And when an enemy dies with the plague, it spreads to a nearby enemy within 25 meters. And you can have more than one of these spreading at the same time. This might be the best LMG of the lot and is extremely effective for all difficulties, solo or group. The downside is the plague is powered by weapon damage, so most Pestilence builds will be running lots of red cores. The slow rate of fire, bad handling, and long reloads open a lot of opportunities for the enemies to flank or bomb you out of existence. So you're going to want to add things to your build to help you continuously fire. It's best if you don't pretend you're not going to be taking damage while that's happening. The Dread Edict exotic SVD marksman rifle can be farmed anywhere targeted loot is set to marksman rifles. This exotic is highly slept on and extremely powerful. It has so many tricks in the bag. Where do I even start? Hit stack to an additional 100% headshot damage and 40% weapon damage. That opens up a lot on your build. First, getting to 400% headshot damage is easy with this weapon. That's good because you're going to want to add some handling. SVDs come with their share of handling issues, and adapting your build for that is worth it for this one. Headshot kills refill the mag and doesn't count as a reload, and that's easy to do. You only need one headshot kill every 10 rounds. High RPM marksman rifles have major ammo issues. Not this one, because those mag refills don't use your ammo reserves, and if you do reload, it consumes the stacks to give you bonus armor. The best thing about this weapon is the stagger power. It staggers more consistently than anything I've seen, and that's the kind of weapon you want in your hand if you're looking for high survivability. If it's not a kill shot, that round is going to stagger and open up the next round for the kill. Play into this and you won't take damage. The downside is there is a learning curve for the firing cadence. This Coyote exotic mask can be farmed at Jefferson Trade Center by beating the final boss or anywhere targeted loot is set to masks. The mask gives you different crit chance and crit damage values at different ranges of engagement. It also gives this to the team. If you're playing aggressive, that 25% crit damage inside 50 meters is a very nice add. This piece finds its way on a lot of crit builds, but it's not always best in slot, especially if your build maxes out crit chance aside from the mask bonuses. The Lady Death can be farmed anywhere targeted loot is set to SMGs. This is one of the most unique exotics we have. The talent is breathe free and moving adds up to 32 stacks of 75% amplified damage per round. Kills grant you 20% movement speed. Fast and strong. This weapon is amazing, and on the right build with good situational awareness, you will be unstoppable. The downside is that mag is small at 32 rounds and the reload isn't fast, so you will be reloading almost more often than you are firing at 900 RPMs. It also gives you 500% melee damage, which is worthless in PvE, and there are many times you get pinned down and cannot get your amplified damage stacks. Sometimes you find yourself literally running circles around the enemy to maintain. It can be a little ridiculous. The Busy Little Bee can be found anywhere targeted loot is set to pistols. This one is so easy. Shooting a target will give you one stack. Hit 10 different targets for 10 stacks, each giving you 20% weapon damage for 10 seconds when you switch out of the handgun. That's it. Simple, strong. Even tagging one target for 20% added damage is a great lift. The downside is that most players don't integrate sidearms into their playstyle strategy. On consoles, it's easy to over and under swap. That can be annoying. Weapon swap speed can be slow, especially with shields. The other downside is that some primary weapon talents will deactivate or reset when you switch out. These things all need to be considered. You have to complete several missions to get the Liberty exotic pistol crafting components. This exotic D50 can be argued as the best pistol in the game. Well, next to the Regulus, and it has better base stats than non-exotic D50s, higher damage, higher RPMs, and better handling and reload time. The talent gives you 60% more weapon damage with body shots. Headshots consume the stacks to repair your shield by 3% per stack. Talent aside, the weapon is strong enough to chain kill with headshots on the right build, and that's how I prefer to use it. You have to complete a crafting quest to get the Nemesis Marksman Rifle. Wielding it will give you the highest one-shot damage in the game. It can two-shot legendary chungas and one-shot everything else. It's got a nice variable zoom digital scope. Again, simple and strong and extremely effective. The downside is that you have to charge the weapon to get the damage. This can lead to missed opportunities and additional unwanted incoming damage. Body flinch can't be negated and almost guarantees a missed shot. The Nemesis is most effective at longer ranges because of this, but it doesn't have the best damage drop-off in the MMR class. Time to kill for snipers works differently. They are one shot, one kill for the most part. That's an instant kill, but not the part that matters when discussing time to kill for MMRs. It's the acquisition of the target that we want to measure, which includes
includes missed shots and the charging time of this one. That makes this one of the slowest time to kills in its class. That doesn't mean it's not effective. It's extremely effective. Actually too effective. Not many enemies in this game can take the damage it can dish out. And even at crazy high damage, those who can still require 2 shots because they're usually accompanied by a helmet. Highly coordinated team plays can make use of this weapon to one-shot legendary bosses or raid bosses. Outside of that, the Nemesis has a very strong place as a utility sniper in the secondary weapon slot. Great against bosses. The Vile Mask can be farmed where masks are set as targeted loot. The talent applies a debuff damage over time for 10 seconds. The damage is based on your concussion grenade and further increased by status effects on your build. When it comes to decreasing the total health pool of the entire enemy force, I'm not sure there's anything that does the job better. It's usually best in slot on team status builds and helps DPS players take down more targets with less bullets and reloads. Ticks are fun. When running this mask on your build, you do have to consider whether the enemy is alive long enough to receive the damage debuff for a worthwhile amount of time. In Legendary, this is not usually a problem. And the cream of the crop, the creme de la creme, the godly exotics. These are the Michael Jordans of the exotic world, the LeBron James of gear. They don't just shine, they blind you with their brilliance. Equip these and you're practically a Division 2 demigod. Most will see a noticeable increase in their own performance if they use these exotics, and those few who persist with one and make it their own become very problematic to the end game. These are the very best exotics in the game, bar none. Their status is not a matter of opinion. Well, at least in my opinion. The Capacitor is easy to get in just a few hours, completing the simple challenges in the summit. This exotic assault rifle makes a case to be on every single skill damage build in the game. As a shooter, the mods help make it one of the best with 10% crit chance and 30% crit damage. It has a high base weapon damage with 12% damage to armor. That's the highest DTA in the game for assault rifles. The downside is the small mag, but you quickly get over that with its short reload time. The talents give you stacks to power up your skills with 60% damage. The gun also gets 7.5% weapon damage from each skill tier on your build. This weapon is a must-have. The Regulus exotic pistol is absolutely one of my favorites all time. It's beautifully designed and feels good to shoot. The base damage is highest in its class and the kill feedback is awesome. This 6-shooter handles well and comes with a fast reload. The talent Regicide is like shooting exploding rounds. Each headshot kill creates a 5-meter explosion, dealing 400% weapon damage and bleed to all enemies hit. It's mayhem in a handgun. It's absolutely perfect in every way. The only downside is that it's locked behind the Iron Horse raid. You have to beat the raid to unlock the crafting quest, but it's the most worthwhile raid locked weapon in the game, hands down. The Mantis exotic sniper is a menace on the battlefield. Get it by farming targeted loot set as MMRs. This is an extremely effective weapon for XP farming with all directives. I've used it to climb 100 floors on the summit in Legendary with all directives. That's 10. It's that good. It doesn't have the highest base weapon damage in the class, and it doesn't have to. It's fast enough to play in close with a smooth damage drop off to play at max 100-meter range. It can see in the dark, highlight weak points, give you 50% amp damage, and most importantly, supply you unlimited decoys. The best skill in the game for snipers and an extremely helpful addition to team play. Headshot kills reset the cooldown of the decoy and puts one in reserve if already in use. This overrides skill dampening directives, and the weapon's one-shot chain killing capabilities requires little ammo. It's strong enough to two-tap chungas like the Nemesis, but is far more effective with an even more impressive time to kill than the Nemesis. The decoy changes AI behavior and keeps them from doing circus acrobats, allowing you to clear entire waves of enemies in seconds. That skill synergy is unlike anything else in the game. This sniper has changed my life. The St. Elmo's Engine exotic assault rifle is a must-have. In TU18, you must complete the rewards track to get it. After, it will be in the general loot pool where you can farm targeted loot set to assault rifles. This has all the makings to be your favorite assault rifle in the game. It has 20% crit chance mod, 20% crit damage mods, and 20% handling with 850 RPM and a uniquely large 70-round mag. It's an M4 with a nice reload speed. The talent gives you a full mag of shock rounds after 100 hits. If you're using this as a DPS primary, that's a nice to have. Switch it up as a utility shock weapon and you own the enemy. That makes this weapon highly versatile for team support and solo builds. There's so much you can do with this weapon, it's insane. This list would not be complete without the Memento backpack. This has been argued as the best exotic in the game. Maybe, but it sure is a must-have. So many builds feature this exotic, you feel personally incomplete if you don't have it. This exotic is so good, I don't think we will ever get another one like it. You can get it simply by farming targeted loot set to backpacks.
exotics. The backpack has 3 cores and short and long-term buffs. You get 30% weapon damage plus 5% more weapon damage for 10 seconds, stacking per red core on your build. 3% armor regen and stackable 10% bonus armor per armor core. 30% skill efficiency with 5% more per skill tier. If you can play into the short-term buffs, there's nothing better out there. If you're a more relaxed player, it's hard to pretend the long-term buffs aren't more worthwhile than any other backpack talent. You can run vigilance for 25% total weapon damage, or you can have 30% weapon damage that the enemy can't take away, increasing by stackable 5s, regen, bonus armor, and skill efficiency. Not really a choice, is it? Players who struggle getting kills or staying on their feet in team play may want to look at alternatives. In skilled players' hands, those short-term buffs and damage that can't be disabled keeps them the apex predator on top of the total damage and top kill list. I'm not a speedrunner, but this backpack has helped me get sub 20-minute runs in Legendary. The downside is that it made many of the existing backpack talents obsolete and undesirable. I find I make builds without the memento, knowing the build is better with the memento, just to not use the memento. It's that good. The Scorpio exotic shotgun can be farmed where loot is set to shotguns. You will see this shotgun everywhere. Solo builds, team play, raids, status builds, tanks, DPS builds, everything. It's extremely easy to use, can status affect targets at range, and disable the fiercest enemies. It's exceptionally great for new players and those who need a little help keeping the enemy from shooting back. It has a fast reload and high base weapon damage, making it effective as a weapon. Then you add the status and additional 20% amp from all sources, and that settles it. It's godly. The downside is that it can be a crutch. You could argue that the 612 non-exotic variant with the damage talent gets to the point before the Scorpio gets to its 20% amp damage. The other downside is that you see way too many players using this weapon beyond its optimal range, but that's not the weapon's fault. This is a must-have in your arsenal and probably the first exotic weapon you need to seek out. So there you have it, the epic saga of 40 exotics in the Division 2 Year 5, ranked in a totally not a tier list way. Remember, it's all about finding your style, your groove, and your playstyle identity. Experiment, have fun, and who knows, maybe one day you'll make these exotics proud. All right, folks, if you enjoyed this video, smash that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and don't forget to hit that bell icon, because you know, YouTube algorithms and stuff. Until next time, stay awesome, stay divisioning, if that's even a word, and I'll catch you in the next one. Cheers.
You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go.